Taking the time to come. ALM has set about an effort officially beginning in 2016, although Cindy, I probably should have talked and we went back and dug to when we originally went to NC State and started our discussions years ago. In 2016, ALM took about a deliberate effort to enter the area of research and further investigation into how you enter this new marketplace. We were advised, I think we received good advice, that there's a couple of hoops you had to jump through. And one, if you wanted to obtain federal grants, which is the aim for the funding for these research projects, you needed to be able to obtain approval through an IRB. That's an Institutional Review Board process. It is required for a federal government grant. That's the direction we were headed, so we needed to prove we could do that. You needed to be able to form a hypothesis or form a question and go about a research project that would be able to prove or disprove those methods that you were looking at. And it needed to be published, the outcomes, in a nationally peer-reviewed publication or journal. In May of this last year, ALM achieved all of those goals. So we have formed and given birth to a new sister organization called the Textile Research Council. And the initial intent of this council is to allow for collaboration within the U.S. of key stakeholders and individuals from the textile care industry to form a council with the goal of producing independent evidence-based research. I'll have to get good at saying that. Our aim, we invited all associations that could provide a perspective on textile research. We invited academic parties to the table and scientific individuals to the table. Our aim is to address unanswered questions or questions, many of them coming from the consumers of our textiles. And right now we are looking primarily in the healthcare arena. Just some examples of that. Just last week, APIC, the Association for Professionals in Infection Control, at their conference, one of their discussions was to resolve the situation that occurred in New Orleans 10 years ago. We need to start sterilizing textiles for fragile patients. Brings on a whole host of new questions. Is that a best approach? There's no research or evidence out there. Hospital IPs are constantly seeking independent evidence-based research to make a determination in practice and how they should proceed. Example, Joint Commission and DNV requires that hospitals have a policy on how often and how they change their cubicle curtains. The IPs go looking for evidence-based research to guide them in developing those policies. There is none. So they're left to their own devices. And things are happening such as sprays on textiles, on dry textiles that have been in use before they're washed. There's no evidence to guide them, so they're having to make their own decisions, relying on just gut and best practice. How long do clean textiles that have been processed and are stored, how long do they remain clean? And under what conditions? Without evidence-based research, clinicians may adopt practices from other applications that may not be relevant to handling textiles. Something that works for a solid surface cleaning may not be appropriate for a dimensional textile. So these are the reasons we are forming the Textile Research Council. We had our first meeting today with the parties that could assemble. Some were out of the country, unavailable, so we did our first initial meeting. And I'm going to turn it over to their newly elected chairperson for that council, the Textile Research Council, is Cindy Moko. Cindy? And Cindy will talk about the council members and introduce them to you. and talk a little bit about where we're going forward. Cindy?
She's going to test me on this. Thank you, Linda. It is my pleasure to introduce those members of the council that not only are here, but also those that will be participating with us in future meetings. I see in the room we have Ryan Catronian, right, from UNX. So we also have Lynn Seahuster, who's microbiologist, epidemiologist, former CDC. We have with us, we're fortunate to have Fontaine Sands. Dr. Sands also is a principal investigator and has a significant background as a full professor in the Department of Graduate Nursing at Eastern Kentucky University. Others that will be participating will be Mel Davis from Cannageezer and representing Takata as well. Leighton Godfrey from the University Wilson College of Textiles, and Ed Macaulay, United Hospital Services representing ARDA. Greg Ishevich from Sterile Surgical Systems representing also HLAC. Daniel Rodriguez from Lexington Infectious Disease Consultants. So these will be the members of our group, our inaugural group as the council members. Our meeting was very productive today as we formulated through bylaws and a lot of the standards and things that we need to do in order to operate as a council. And our first discussions began on selecting a project that we'll be moving forward with very quickly. We have a number of those topics that we'll be discussing with those council members who were unable to attend, and hopefully within the next month be well on our way to writing our first proposal for grant funding. So, are there any questions for either Linda or I?
We do have a list of the council members and their CVs here for you. So if you want to pick those up, who else is participating and their background and their history and the value they're bringing to the council. No questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
How does the healthcare industry communicate with you? How will we know that you know of our concern? Is there a website we're going to go to in order to lodge a question, a blog? What would be the best way to communicate with you?
That is a great question. There will be.
The website is textileresearchcouncil.org. There will be a place on there that other organizations besides those that we've partnered with, organizations like AORN, APIC, other organizations may submit suggestions or areas that they would like for us to consider for research. So we will always, the council will always be taking that information in, or anyone can. Those were just two examples of those that we have had conversations with. Good question. Thanks, Judy.
I got a question.
Yes.
So how many of these projects would you all say you're going to try and do in a year? Or is that just too broad stroke at this point? Because I know it's so early on.
It is early on. It depends upon the projects that we get in as far as how many we can manage and get grant funding for. We won't move forward with one until grant funding there's a partnership with it. Our primary looks are to organizations like the federal government and EPA, NIH, and also private organizations such as Robert Wood Johnson Foundation that gives grants for research. So we'll be looking to entities like that to partner with it. We really feel like at this time, given the way we're setting up the council and then the sub-working groups that will work on projects within the council, probably 3 is about as many as we could manage at a time. A project may likely run more than a year. It may run, by the time you write the grant, receive the proposal, start the funding, I know when we went through our pilot project, we put forth a proposal and we gathered SMEs, and when the SMEs came together, they said, that's not the way the industry works, you're gonna need to do this and do this and do this, so we made modifications. And we even had to go back and modify then one more time after that, once we started enlisting enrollees, because they said, nobody, and what we were looking for in that one was exchange carts that are built at the laundry. And we found out there weren't enough laundries out there who were building exchange carts anymore. They were being built at the hospital. So we had to go back and modify again. So when you deal with modifications and when you're working with an IRB, each time you make a modification to that project, you have to go back to the IRB. You have to wait and get in their cycle again. It was a learning process for me. I thought it was gonna be something quick, and I'm sure Fontaine and Lynn are both laughing at that, going, yeah, we knew that. It was a learning process for me. Nothing moves fast. But they're taking care of patients and making sure safety is a priority. So it's right, it's right. And even going through the IRB certification process was an experience. So we will, I don't foresee us coming up with results. I mean, this time next year, if we've got a project running, I'll be very happy. I'll be thrilled. So it's gonna be slow. It's one, there's not a lot of research done anymore. There's not a lot of money in it. You know, trying to find funding for it, and it takes a lot. We were very grateful to have two sponsors for our pilot project, both UNX and Ecolab, because chemical companies had no skin in the game. We weren't looking at chemicals, we were looking at textiles from the time they arrived at the hospital through 24 to 28 hours up on the floor and back down to the linen room again was our look. So we weren't looking at chemicals. They had no skin in the game. They were not involved in the process, but they graciously provided financial assistance for that. So we won't be looking for that with the upcoming projects. We will be looking to grantors. Anything else? We're excited where it's going, even though it may be a slow moving wheel. I think it's going to be a big one. Thanks.